Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. This time we're looking into car hacking.
Oh, wow.
We've got two DEEF-Con talks that you guys sent in from YouTube.
Okay.
One's all about how to hack police radar,
Uh-huh.
and then the other one focuses on a Tesla Model S.
So we're going to see two completely different types of hacking then.
Exactly. And by the time we're done, you'll have a much better understanding of how car hacking works, some of the techniques that are involved,
Okay.
the implications, and then all the legal issues that surround it.
Sounds good.
What do you want to start with?
Let's do the radar one first.
Okay, so first up, we've got Bill Swearingen from Kansas City,
Mm-hmm.
and he's a self-proclaimed hacker. He co-founded a hackerspace and was even on the team that put together that CCC meetup.
Okay, so this guy's pretty plugged into the community then.
Yeah, and he's got some stories. Like, about 10 years ago, he actually built a device that would trigger traffic lights to turn green,
Oh, wow.
and he went to the media to talk about it.
I bet that didn't go so well.
No, not at all.
Traffic lights are kind of important. Yeah. Turns out, talking to Wired Magazine about how you potentially messed with emergency traffic light systems is a bad idea, especially when what you did is a federal offense.
I mean, you can't just go around messing with traffic lights.
Definitely not. So he paid some fines, did some jail time,
Hopefully he learned his lesson.
and now he's back to share some more knowledge.
Right, well, what's he talking about this time?
This time it's all about police radar.
Interesting. So how does that work?
Well, he starts out by explaining that police radar uses something called the Doppler shift
Oh, yeah.
to figure out how fast you're going. And basically, they bounce high-frequency radio waves or microwaves off of objects. And by measuring the change in frequency of that returning signal, they can calculate the speed.
So it's like the Doppler effect, like with a siren.
Exactly.
As it approaches you and passes you, the pitch changes.
Right.
But this is with radio waves instead of sound waves.
Yeah. And the key measurement here is speed.
All right.
He actually brought a police officer on stage for a live demo.
Oh, wow. A live demo.
Yeah, to really hammer that point home. He first used a modified radar gun to trick the officer's radar gun into thinking that he was standing still, and then showed how to make it think that he was traveling at 111 miles per hour.
Oh, my God.
It was really funny, actually. But it also clearly demonstrated just how vulnerable these systems can be.
It's crazy how a little bit of understanding about how this technology works can allow somebody to manipulate it like that.
Totally. So now we know that police radar uses radio waves to measure speed.
Right.
But there are different types of radar that are actually used.
Oh,
And he
yeah.
talked about XK and Ka bands.
I've heard of those.
Yeah.
So each of those has a different history, and they're found in different places.
Uh-huh.
Like X-band was one of the earliest types.
Mm.
We don't see it that often these days.
Right.
K-band is probably the most common one, at least in the U.S. And I know it's used globally, but it tends to have a lot of false alerts
Yeah.
because it operates in the same frequency as some automatic doors.
Yeah. And Ka band is the newest one.
Mm-hmm.
It's becoming more and more common, but there's actually a Ku band that's used in Europe.
Oh, really?
He did mention that. So getting back to the hacking part of it.
Okay.
He explained how, theoretically, you could build a device that just continuously transmits a signal at a desired speed, like 65 miles an hour,
You okay?
which would effectively jam the police radar.
And he actually goes through and uses the Doppler shift equation to show you how to calculate the exact frequency you would need
Yeah.
to make this hack work.
It's pretty clever. But then I was thinking, what happens when the speed limit changes?
Oh, yeah.
Like you're in a school zone.
Good point.
Or you're on the highway. What happens then?
Well, he does have a solution for that.
Okay.
He said that modern radar detectors,
Uh-huh.
which can actually pick up radar signals miles ahead and share frequency information via Bluetooth, could be combined with like an app
Oh.
that knows the speed limit to solve this problem.
So you could theoretically build a radar jammer that knows the speed limit and adjusts accordingly.
Theoretically, yes. But he did say that radar jammers have been illegal in the U.S. since 1996.
Oh.
And the FCC does not mess around with this at all. They have prohibited not only using them and selling them, but even advertising them.
Wow. Okay, so that idea's out.
Yeah, correct.
But he didn't stop there.
Uh-huh.
He moved on to laser jamming,
Laser jamming.
which is actually regulated by the FDA and not the FCC.
Oh, that's interesting because it uses light instead of radio waves.
Wait, the FDA?
Yep.
Really?
Seems odd, but it makes sense.
So how do these laser guns actually work?
So, like, really, really accurate high-speed distance measurers.
Okay.
And cops will target specific areas of a car with them, like the headlights or the license plate.
Uh-huh.
And they just measure the distance to the car over a certain amount of time.
So they're measuring distance, not speed.
Right. That's how they get the speed, but that's also how you can jam them.
Okay.
So laser jammers basically exploit the timing of the laser pulses
Oh.
and send back signals to confuse the gun. And one way to do this is to just send out a pulse every millisecond, which will cause an error on the police laser gun.
So now this is where it gets interesting. Laser jamming is legal in about 2/3 of the U.S.
It is. It really depends on what state you're in.
And to top it off, Swearingen announced his plan to release an open-source laser jammer called Nachacocha that only uses about $8 worth of parts.
Wow.
And has, like, basic laser jamming functionality.
Very much in line with the hacker community, sharing knowledge and making things accessible.
He unfortunately didn't have a working model to show at DEF CON because he broke it. But he did release all the code and encouraged other people to help finish it.
So we're going from DIY hacking to potentially something anyone can build.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
All right, so how about we switch gears
Great.
and take a look at this Tesla Model S hack.
Sounds good. Let's see what we got.
All right, so this next DEF CON talk is all about hacking a Tesla Model S.
Oh, yeah, the Tesla Model S? That's a good one to look at. I mean, all that tech and connectivity, it's almost like a perfect target.
Yeah.
For security researchers who are trying to figure out, the future of car security.
It's like a glimpse into the future where all cars are headed.
It is, and the hackers in this talk, they were pretty clear that they weren't trying to create tools for, like, malicious purposes. Their goal was to, like, discover vulnerabilities and then work with Tesla to, like, make the car more secure.
So they're like the ethical hackers. They're finding the weaknesses so they can be patched.
Exactly.
Before somebody with bad intentions can exploit them. So their first step was to understand the internal architecture of the car.
Right. And they focused on 3 main computer systems.
Okay.
The instrument cluster, the center information display, and then the gateway that connects them.
Okay, so we've got the IC. That's like the screen that's behind the steering wheel.
Yep.
Got the CID. That's that big touch screen in the middle. And then the gateway is like the bridge between all those systems and the car's function.
Yep, you got it. So they use a combination of physical disassembly and then digital probing to investigate these systems.
I bet they had like a ton of tools for that.
Oh, yeah. They did mention being a little apprehensive at first.
Yeah.
Especially when they heard, like, plastic breaking.
Oh.
But apparently that's just kind of normal when taking apart a Tesla.
Good to know.
Yeah.
So they got the car apart, started looking for vulnerabilities. Where did they start?
So they explored every possible attack surface.
Oh, okay.
I'm talking USB Bluetooth, Wi-Fi memory cards. They even found this, like, mysterious Ethernet port.
Oh, wow.
And they even looked into the car's VPN connection.
They really left no stone unturned.
They did not. But one of the things they found pretty early on was pretty surprising.
What was that?
They found a file on a memory card that was literally labeled car keys.
No way, they just left the keys lying around.
Well, not keys like you're thinking. They were cryptographic keys.
Okay.
Much more complex than, your average car key.
Oh.
But the fact that they were stored in a file with such a simple name, like, that's a potential security risk.
So even with all this high-tech security, something as basic as a file name can be a vulnerability.
It can. It's a good reminder that human error is often the weakest link.
Totally. They also discovered that the car's browser was based on an old version of Ubuntu.
Yeah. That had some known security holes.
Did they try to exploit it?
Yeah, so they did try to use a JavaScript vulnerability to gain access, but that didn't work.
So it was back to the drawing board?
Well, not quite.
Okay.
They discovered that both the IC and the CID had OpenX11 servers, which allowed them to control elements of the displays.
What?
For example, they were able to manipulate the speedometer to show a ridiculously high speed.
I can just imagine the driver's face.
Yeah.
If that happened while they were driving.
It's funny, but it's also kind of scary if you think about it. If you can manipulate what the driver sees, I mean, that could have some pretty serious implications.
Yeah, so they could mess with the displays. What else did they find?
So they also found an updater service that provided information about the car's firmware.
Hold on, the firmware. That's like the car's brain, right?
Exactly. And they found the URL for downloading the firmware.
So they had the URL to download the car's brain, but they couldn't access it?
Initially, yes.
Okay.
Even with the VPN configuration, they couldn't get in. Yeah. But remember, they're persistent and they're resourceful.
So how did they finally get access?
They physically tapped into the Ethernet connection of the IC.
You're kidding?
Nope. Remember that scotch tape and those wires?
Yeah.
That's what those were for.
Wow. They went old school hacker on that one.
They did. It just goes to show that sometimes physical access
Yeah.
can bypass even the toughest digital security.
Totally. So they got in through the Ethernet connection. What happened next?
They were able to download the car's firmware and start analyzing it. And what they discovered is the car used a security token
Okay.
that rotated every 24 hours, which is actually a good security practice. But then they discovered that that security token was stored in plain text on the file system.
They left the keys out in the open again.
It seems that way.
Yeah.
And this gave them access to the CID.
So another example of how a small detail can have a big security implication.
You got it, and it gets better.
Okay.
They found the password hash for the IC in the firmware and cracked it.
They cracked it.
Yeah.
So that gives them like complete control.
It does. They had root access to the IC. This shows how important secure password storage is.
All right, so they got root access to the IC. They got access to the CID. What about that gateway? That's the connection to the car's core systems.
Right. So the gateway was their next target.
Okay.
And they were actually able to use that security token to generate Ethernet tokens, which gave them control of the gateway.
So they used one key to get another key.
Essentially, they were systematically working their way through the car's network, exploiting each vulnerability to get to the next level.
It's like a digital heist movie?
It is.
So what was their next move?
So for their final act, they used all of this to remotely power down the car while it was moving.
We're kidding. Did it crash?
No. So they did this in a controlled environment at like a low speed. And they point out that like the Tesla is designed to handle a sudden loss of power.
Oh, okay.
So it'll either like come to a stop or go into neutral.
Good. So they found some weaknesses, but it sounds like Tesla also did some things, right?
They did. They outlined a few things Tesla did well.
Okay.
Like they had over-the-air updates, VPNs, and isolating drive-critical systems.
Okay. And this is the best part.
What's that?
Tesla actually set up a bug bounty program.
That's awesome.
And worked with these hackers to patch the vulnerabilities.
Good for them. They recognize the importance of like collaborating with the security research community.
Totally. So now we've got a pretty clear picture of two very different approaches to car hacking.
Yeah.
What happens when we compare them? Okay, so we've got Bill Swearingen with his like homemade radar and laser jammers.
Right.
And then this team of hackers taking apart a Tesla Model S and diving deep into its software. It's like two totally different worlds.
It is.
Swearingen's work, it really captures that classic hacker spirit.
Right.
You know, he's tinkering, experimenting, pushing the boundaries with whatever he can get his hands on.
He's like the MacGyver of car hacking.
Yeah, I like that. You know, finding these clever workarounds and solutions without needing fancy tools or labs.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, you've got the Tesla hackers. You know, they needed a deep understanding of these complex systems and like specialized skills to even get started. It's like the difference between a mechanic who can rebuild an engine, and a team of cybersecurity experts who can crack the toughest codes.
It's a great analogy.
Both approaches are valuable, though. You know, Swearingen's work shows us how vulnerable everyday technology can be.
Right.
And how a little ingenuity can expose those weaknesses. And then the Tesla hack demonstrates just how challenging it is to secure these highly connected cars.
Yeah, and as cars become more like computers on wheels,
right.
I mean, the stakes just keep getting higher.
So what's next? What new vulnerabilities are we going to see as cars become even more connected and autonomous? What's it going to take to stay ahead of the curve?
I mean, will we see cars turning into these, like, digital fortresses with tons of security? Or will determined hackers always find a way in?
That's the question.
It is. What do you think?
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
As technology gets more complex, the potential for vulnerabilities increases. But at the same time, security measures are also constantly evolving.
It's a constant race.
Yeah, it really is. I think we're going to see a combination of both. You know, automakers are going to keep trying to build more secure systems, but hackers are always going to be looking for ways to break them.
Yeah.
It's that constant push and pull that drives innovation. But what I do know is that we need to be having these conversations.
I completely agree.
You know, we need to keep learning and talking about these issues, especially as our vehicles become more and more intertwined with our digital lives.
For sure.
This whole deep dive into car hacking has been pretty eye-opening, and I bet our listeners are thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
What do you all think is going to happen with the future of car security? Are we headed towards impenetrable vehicles, or will they always have weaknesses? Head over to our social media and tell us what you think. We want to hear your take on all of this.
Yeah, it's a topic that deserves a lot of attention. I mean, the security of our vehicles is going to be crucial for our safety and our privacy
Yeah.
for years to come.
Well, on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the wild world of car hacking. We hope you found it as interesting as we did. Until next time, keep those minds curious and stay safe out there on the digital highways.